was. He was a filthy child murderer who killed at least 20 kids in the neighborhood.
It was the worst nightmare I ever had. You wouldn't believe it.
Matter of fact, I had a bad dream last night myself.
But he can't get you now. He's dead, honey, because Mommy killed him.
Nancy, you dreamed about the same creep I did.
Whatever you do, don't fall asleep.
A Nightmare on Elm Street slashed its way onto the screen in November of 1984 in the USA and hit UK shores the following August. The film became a smash hit on both sides of the Atlantic and changed the face of modern horror. The film follows a group of teenagers who are experiencing terrifying nightmares that seem a little too real. Through sharing their stories, it soon becomes apparent that there's a link to their dreams, with the same mysterious character stalking them.
That's amazing you saying that. That made me remember the dream I had last night.
What'd you dream?
I dreamed about a guy in a dirty red and green sweater.
This only gets worse and results in them actually being killed in their dreams by this stalker, until Nancy takes it upon herself to unravel the puzzle and attempt to put a stop to their mysterious killer. She learns from her mother that the man from her dreams is actually the ghost of a child killer known as Freddy Krueger, and that years ago her parents, along with the others from the town, had taken it upon themselves to exact some vigilante justice after a court had failed to find him guilty due to a technicality.
A bunch of us parents tracked him down after they let him out. We found him in an old abandoned boiler room where he used to take his kids.
Go on.
Took gasoline. We poured it all around the place and made a trail of it out the door. Then lit the whole thing up and watched it burn.
But he would return with a vengeance to the dreams of the remaining Elm Street children. Following the successes of his films Last House on the Left and The Hills Have Eyes, director Wes Craven had written a script for a different kind of horror. Although Wes's previous films had been received as ultra-violent horror flicks, they still had a social message behind them when looked at a little deeper. Elm Street was no exception. The story and the characters came to Wes through a number of sources, including his own experiences.
Nightmare on Elm Street came out of a series of articles in the LA Times, if I'm not mistaken, starting in, I would guess, in the late 70s. They were, as I remember, about 3 to 6 months apart, and they were not correlated. That is, the LA Times, for whatever reasons, did not sort of catch that they had had a story about this before. They were all very small, and essentially they would go like, some young man, usually of Southeast Asian origin, had been reported to have died in the middle of a nightmare. And the first two I clipped and kept without thinking too much about it, and then the third one had really the nub of a story in it. And basically this kid, and he had been he and his family had come out of the relocation camps in Southeast Asia, I think Cambodia, something like that. They were now in the United States, living someplace in California. And he had been troubled by severe nightmares. And they had they had increased in intensity to the point where he had told his family, these are not, they don't feel ordinary. And his family had tried to console him and tell him, you know, we've come out of this terrible background. Nightmares are a normal part of your psyche, trying to deal with that. And but he increased in the sense of trying to say, this doesn't feel normal. It feels too real. And at a certain point, they had a doctor prescribe sleeping medicine for him, and his father insisted he take it. And it turned out later that he had taken the pills in under their supervision, and then as soon as they were away, he had spit them out. And they also discovered later that he had a coffee pot in his closet that he had kept with black coffee to stay awake at night. So this had gone on. He had decided at a certain point to stay awake and not sleep. And obviously the family thought he was having something like a nervous breakdown. And after about 3 days, he would be downstairs watching television all through the night. They went down and found him asleep on the couch, and the father brought him back to his bed. And the family, sort of felt like, thank God, he seems to be sleeping peacefully. And they all went to bed. And later in the night, they heard screaming and thrashing about. They ran into his room. And before they could get to him, he fell dead, stone dead. And the family had to have an autopsy done. And there was no heart failure. There was no sign of why he had died. That was a story. It was about a 10-inch story instead of the others were 3 or 4-inch stories. And I just read that. I said, this is like, it just evoked something very deep in me.
The film went into production with small distribution company New Line Cinema, who up until that point had only distributed a few pictures. But with a small budget and a passionate group of filmmakers, the Elm Street project became a reality and launched the company onto a path of success. Classically trained actor Robert Englund was cast as the dream stalker Fred Krueger. Robert at the time was best known for his role on the sci-fi TV series V. Little did Robert know that his involvement with this small budget horror film would change his life forever and make him and the character one of the most famous film stars of the 80s. Young actress Heather Langenkamp was cast for the role of the heroine Nancy. Heather only had 2 previous credits as an extra to her name. Since then, Heather returned for the sequel, A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, as well as Wes Craven's New Nightmare. She appeared in several TV series before turning to the other side of the camera, in varying roles such as director, producer, and also some makeup credits to her name. Johnny Depp was cast as Nancy's boyfriend Glenn. This would be Johnny's first film role. Johnny would go on to become a global superstar, best known for his roles as Edward Scissorhands, Willy Wonka, and Jack Sparrow in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, amongst many others. Veteran actor John Saxon was cast as Police Chief Thompson. John had a very successful career and was one of the names the production used to gain interest in overseas markets. Director Wes Craven would go on to be one of the best-known names in horror, with memorable films such as Deadly Friend, The Serpent and the Rainbow, and Shocker. Wes was not a part of the sequel Freddy's Revenge. However, he returned to the series for number 3 with a screenplay credit. In 1991, he appeared as himself in Wes Craven's New Nightmare. 1996 saw the release of Scream, a massive success which took the modern cliches of horror and turned them on their head. The film spawned several sequels before ending with Part 4. In 1999, Wes got the opportunity to direct Meryl Streep in the film Music from the Heart. Although the film wasn't very successful, it resulted in Meryl Streep receiving an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress. Wes continued his career with several more successful horrors, as well as writing a novel. Wes died in August of 2015, aged 76. Although the film was made on a tight budget, it featured some great practical effects work. 2 scenes in this movie used the rotating set effect. Other memorable practical effects shots were the bathtub scene and the stretching wall behind Nancy's bed. All of these techniques were used to tremendous effect and added greatly to the surrealism of the dream sequences. The makeup was also a great achievement. Robert Englund's facial appliance was fashioned by makeup artist David Miller. The makeup would take hours to apply before any filming could take place, with Robert Englund immediately pulling it off once he had completed his shots each day. Charles Bernstein was hired to write the score for the film. Previous to Charles's involvement, the nursery rhyme, 1-2 Freddy's Coming for You, had already been written and recorded. Charles used this rhyme and incorporated it into his score, as well as creating the main theme.
So the melody is playing with your sense of order. Maybe we go to there, and another note that doesn't belong.
Charles's score really adds to the film. Following the film's success, a sequel was quickly put into production.
Someone is coming back to Elm Street.
Freddy's Revenge took the story in a slightly different direction, dealing with possession, and also brought Freddy from the dreamland into the real world. The film was a success financially, but many involved were unhappy with the new direction. Due to the financial success of Part 2, another sequel went into production. The Dream Warriors took the story back to the roots of the original and brought back several cast members, as well as introducing characters that would also go on to lay the foundations for further sequels. 1988 saw the arrival of Part 4, The Dream Master. By now, Freddy had become a pop culture icon. This film picked up on Freddy's cultural status with the MTV generation and embraced it. A further 2 sequels, The Dream Child and Freddy's Dead, were released in subsequent years before Freddy was retired. 1991 saw the release of Wes Cravens' New Nightmare, a unique take on the Elm Street premise. This film takes place in the real world, with cast and crew that have had involvement in the previous films appearing as themselves after it's revealed that the character of Freddy exists in the real world after his stories have stopped being told. And finally, following fan demand after Freddy's glove appeared in a cameo nod at the end of Jason Goes to Hell the Final Friday, 2003 saw the release of Freddy vs. Jason, with the lead villains of the Friday the 13th and Elm Street films facing off against each other. In 2010 a remake was released. Robert Englund was no longer in the role of Freddy. The film was an attempt to kickstart a new series of films, but was poorly received and never received a sequel. The success of the Elm Street series spawned a TV series in 1988. Freddy's Nightmares was an anthology series with a different tale of terror presented by Freddy Krueger each episode. The first episode took a look at the backstory of Krueger and his subsequent fate. The series wasn't a success, but lasted for 2 seasons. Countless toys and comic books have been released throughout the years. Freddy even had his own album. Robert Englund reprised his role in 2018 for the TV series The Goldbergs. This was the first time that Robert had appeared on screen in makeup since Freddy vs. Jason 15 years earlier. A Nightmare on Elm Street changed the face of horror in the 1980s. Its continually inventive deaths influenced many future films such as The Final Destination and Saw franchises. It created an unlikely pop culture star out of its villain and was also responsible for the success of New Line Cinema. New Line went on to produce some of the greatest films of the 80s, 90s and 2000s, including the Blade series, the Austin Powers movies and Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy, which was nominated for a total of 30 Academy Awards, for which it won 17. In 2008, New Line Cinema became a subsidiary of Warner Brothers. New Line would still finance and produce their own films, but under the umbrella of Warner. Elm Street continues to be a fan favourite, with regular talks and rumours of Robert Englund reprising his role in a future film. Despite the quality of some of its sequels, the original film still holds up well to this day, with the series fondly remembered and celebrated by fans all over the world. Thanks for watching, and see you next time on Retro Reels.
From Wes Cravens, director of The Hills Have Eyes and Last House on the Left, a new masterpiece in fantasy terror, Nightmare on Elm Street.
kid like to sit.